Let's talk about 7 causes of cancer you probably have never heard before. And you probably also know that like viruses could cause cancer. But there's some other really interesting things that can cause cancer that you need to know about it. So I'm going to go through this list, and then I want to talk to you about the nature of cancer and some real interesting things about it that you need to know. So definitely watch this entire video. Okay, number 1, inflammation in general, especially if it's chronic in nature, can activate cancer and even make cells that are precancerous into a full-blown cancer. They can even increase the malignancy of a cancer. And even drugs, medical drugs that inhibit inflammation, also, it can even come from an overactive immune system. Also, in inflammation, you have hypoxia. You have a lack of oxygen in a certain area, and that also can activate cancer. Number 2, stress. Chronic stress can initiate cancer. There's someone that I'm very close to recently that got rid of their cancer, but went through a stressful event and the cancer came back. In fact, the first time the person had cancer, they went through a stressful event. So stress can activate certain genetics that can increase the risk of getting cancer. Chronic stress activates cortisol that can paralyze the immune system. So it puts your immune system in a state of, inactivity, and then things can happen, right? Part of the immune system is all about killing off cancer cells as well as viruses. So if you don't have that defense mechanism, you are more susceptible to getting cancer. Number 3, loneliness can increase your risk of getting cancer, as well as social isolation. There's been links to cancer. Several studies have indicated this, especially for breast and colon cancer. It was a study done on 9,000 women in 2012. And then in 2019, there was a study done on 12,000 people over the age of 50 that showed this association between loneliness and cancer. In one report that I read, it was comparable to smoking and obesity as far as the risk factors, which is very, very interesting. So you can imagine if someone is isolated or they're very lonely, okay, it's going to bring their emotions way, way, way down. And that definitely can affect every single cell in their body, especially the immune system. All right, next one is bereavement. This is grieving. This is the loss of someone, a loved one. And this can have a devastating effect on your whole physiology, including the immune system. In 2016, there was a study done on a loss of a spouse, increased in the risk of lung cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, and even skin cancer. Number 5 is depression. The link between having depression and increasing your risk of getting cancer. In 2009, it studied this connection and showed an increased risk of getting cancer to the lung, the colon, and the rectum. So depression also related to these other things, like a loss of a loved one. You're going to get depressed. And when you're depressed, there's probably a lot of stress going on too. That's causing the depression. And then let's talk about number 6. Lack of sleep increases your risk of getting cancer. Even going from 7 hours to 6 hours, that loss of 1 hour can increase the risk of getting certain types of cancer. Now, of course, a lack of sleep also can increase stress and cortisol. If you think about it, what is one function of cortisol? It's an anti-inflammatory. That's why they give it to people like prednisone, for example, for all types of inflammation. Well, here's my question. If you're going through all this stress, shouldn't stress, because it increases cortisol, get rid of your inflammation and make you pain-free and inflammation-free? Well, this also relates to another video I did on insulin and insulin resistance. When you have high levels of insulin for a period of time, you downgrade the receptors to the point where it doesn't work anymore. So the key word is chronic. Chronic activation of cortisol creates a cortisol deficiency. So when you have inflammation from stress, you're lacking cortisol in the receptors. And this is why they have to give you cortisone shots, or you have to take prednisone, which I don't recommend. But the point is this: chronic is kind of the key word. A little bit of stress is actually good for us. A little bit of inflammation is fine. part of the healing process. But when you have chronic inflammation, okay, chronic stress, chronic depression over a long period of time, that's when things become a problem. Now, number 7, EMF, electromagnetic fields. This thing on your next to your head, okay? Talking about your computer, power cables. I mean, EMF is classified as a possible carcinogen to humans. Now, you might be countering that by saying, well, wait a second, if that's so true, why don't they talk about this in the news? Why don't they recommend that we avoid it? Do you realize how much money is involved in this? This is probably the next tobacco situation. It took years before they acknowledged that tobacco is bad. I predict years from now, they're going to also talk about how EMF create a lot of problems. And my initial introduction to EMF was when I was doing seminars for all the governmental agencies, and I went into the National Science Institute and talked to one of the researchers there. And he was the one who brought up, did you know the link between EMF and brain tumors and brain cancer in children? I'm like, no. He says, yeah, look it up. Interesting. So anyways, I'm bringing that up to point out that you should start to use your phone at a distance with the speaker, or have some type of ear device that doesn't draw a current right into your brain, and start looking at this EMF situation, because it is a problem, especially for adults and teenagers that are just constantly on their cell phone 24/7. Now, let me just talk a little bit about cancer, because this is really, really important. They've been studying this theory about how cancer is caused by mutated genes for a very, very long time, okay? And this model has funded a tremendous amount of research, but with very, very little success. I'm talking about using chemo, radiation, and surgery. The outcome from those 3 therapies is almost insignificant. It's marginal. They're looking at it from surrogate endpoints. What does that mean? How much the tumor shrinks. But that does not relate directly to outcomes, like survival outcomes. Why? Because of the toxicity involved in shrinking the tumor. Now, I'm not denying that there's not genetic mutations involved, but based on a tremendous amount of research, the mutations that are developed are downstream, okay? That happens after the cancer has started. In other words, the mutations are secondary. There's something else that occurs first, okay, that initiates the cancer. And this work was initiated by Dr. Otto Warburg, and also done presently by Dr. Frederick Seefried. And both of those doctors isolated the location of the cancer is not in the gene. If it was, we would have had a cure for it long ago. The location of the cancer originates in the mitochondria. That's the energy factory of the cell. What's really, really interesting about this is an experiment that has been done over and over and over again. If you take healthy DNA from a healthy cell and you put it into a cancer cell, okay, and just inject it in there, that healthy cell will convert over and turn into cancer. If you take the DNA from a cancer cell and you inject it into a healthy cell where the environment is healthy, you will not get cancer. So this experiment basically tells us that it's the environment that dictates what happens, the environment of that gene. It's the lifestyle that you live. It's the things that you're bathed in all day long. The genes are secondary. They're not in the driver's seat. And this is why all these activators are such big factors. And these are all things that you can do something about, right? You can actively and aggressively counter your stress by exercising, by doing physical work, by walking into nature, by changing your environment, by taking vitamin B1, taking adaptogens like ashwagandha, being in social environments, helping others, donating, contributing. All those things actually help reduce stress. The other point about this is that the key word is chronic, right? Chronic inflammation, chronic stress, things like that. When we talk about chronic inflammation, that's usually activated by something you're doing in your diet, that you're consuming too many omega-6 fatty acids, or you're doing too many refined carbs and not enough omega-3 like cod liver oil. So there's many things you can do to counter this chronic inflammatory situation. Like, for example, genetically, I have really bad genes for inflammation. So I have to constantly make sure I don't overtrain, constantly make sure I take enough cod liver oil. I use the right foods. I don't eat refined foods or greasy foods from like hydrogenated oils and things like that. With trans fats, I have to avoid all those. So you have the power to change your diet, keep that in check, actively and aggressively do things on a regular basis to counter the stress that life gives you, including not watching the crazy news that's out there, as well as hanging out with toxic people, being on a diet that's not inflammatory, and also start to be aware of your environment, to start looking at these EMFs. There's a great little device that you can get to measure your EMFs. This is the one I use. It's called TriField, and this could measure EMFs. This one's simple to use. You just turn it on, and you can start bringing it close to different devices around your environment to see what is creating the most frequencies. And then you can change that very easily, like I did. I completely set up my computer very far away from me. I always use my cell phone from a distance, and I don't use those earbuds. Those are really bad. Now, if you haven't seen my video on EMF, okay, it's pretty interesting. You should check it out. I put it up right here.